The war table was the size of a small room, and it held the world in its palm. Fleet singer Osirath Vale stood at its edge and looked at the blue planet turning slowly in the holographic light. Small, wet, loud with radio signals that the Empire had been listening to for 30 years. The humans had no idea anyone was listening. That was the first thing that made them easy. The second thing was their numbers. Osirath read them from the briefing tile in his hand, the way a man reads a list he has already memorized. 31 orbital platforms, 400 million ground troops, 1,700 nuclear warheads, all pointed at each other. His war council laughed at the last one. He let them laugh. It was good for morale before a strike. The council sat in a ring around the war table. 8 commanders, old families, old blood. Every one of them had been part of the last expansion, the Keth absorption, 4 years ago. Clean work. 11 days from first contact to full surrender. The Empire had added the Keth tributary worlds to the maps before the bodies were cold. This would be faster. Projections, Osirath said. His second-in-command, a tall officer named Veth, stepped forward and pulled up the strike plan. Red lines appeared over the blue planet. Impact zones. The red was almost beautiful against the blue. 3 orbital passes, Veth said. Primary population centers first. Communication infrastructure second. Any remaining military response in the third pass. He paused. We don't expect a third pass to be necessary. No one argued. No one had anything to add. The council looked at the little planet and saw a problem that had already been solved. That was the nature of the Seventh Fleet. It did not come to negotiate. It did not come to warn. It came after the decision was made, after the arguments were over, after every path except one had been closed. By the time the Seventh Fleet arrived, the outcome existed. The action was just the universe catching up. Osirath had done this 31 times, 31 species, 31 events that the official records called absorptions, because the word was cleaner than the truth. Some species had fought. Most had sent signals into the dark, distress calls, surrender requests, prayers aimed at gods who never answered. All of them had gone quiet in the end. All species went quiet in the end. He was about to call the vote when a voice came from the far end of the table. Sir. It was the junior analyst, young. Too young, Osirath had thought when she arrived on the flagship 6 months ago. But someone with seniority had arranged the posting, and he had not questioned it. She was holding a data tile in both hands. Her face was very still, in the way that faces go still when the person holding them is trying hard not to look afraid. There is an anomaly, she said. Osirath looked at her. Show me. She placed the tile on the table. The hologram shifted, pulled down through the planet's surface, below the cities, below the rock, underground. A network spread across 6 continents. Tunnels, chambers, structures connected to each other by pathways too regular to be natural. Old. Some of it was very old. The construction had been happening for decades, maybe longer, below the surface of a world that had never known it was being watched. The geometry is not right for bunkers, she said. The shapes don't match any shelter design in our database. And there is a power source feeding the whole network, a large one, active. The council looked at the images. One commander made a sound that was almost a laugh. Bunkers, he said. They dug holes to hide in. Every threatened species does it eventually. The shapes, the analyst said, are not... Thank you, Osirath said. Noted. She had the kind of eyes that were very good at understanding when an argument was over. She took her tile back. She sat down. She did not speak again for the rest of the meeting. He had noted it. That was what he told himself afterward. The vote was unanimous. 8 commanders, 8 raised hands, 8 names in the official record that would one day be used in military academies as an example of decisive, coordinated action in the face of a species that had foolishly believed its nuclear weapons and its radio signals and its underground rooms were any kind of answer to what was coming. After the council was dismissed, Osirath stayed alone at the war table. He looked at the planet. It was still turning, still broadcasting. The humans sent enormous amounts of music into space. His linguists had spent years translating the content of their transmissions, and the reports all said the same thing. Songs about loss, songs about people who had gone away and not come back, songs about waiting in the dark for something. He turned the hologram off. The flagship hummed around him. 40 kilometers of metal and purpose, moving through space with the quiet certainty of something that had never been stopped. Behind it, the rest of the fleet. Behind the fleet, the home systems of the Empire. Behind the Empire, 400 years of expansion, and 31 worlds that had learned, one by one, that the universe had an order to it, and they were not at the top. He walked to his private chamber. The lights adjusted as he entered. He stood at his window for a while, looking at the stars. He thought about the analyst's images, the underground structures, the strange geometry, the power source feeding all of it like a slow, patient heartbeat deep in the rock. He thought about it for 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then he stopped thinking about it. He checked the environmental panel on the wall. The temperature in his chamber was exactly right. He looked at the reading for a moment. He adjusted it anyway. He went to sleep. In the morning, the fleet moved. The little blue planet kept turning below them, still sending its music into the dark, still waiting for something it had no reason to believe was coming. From above, from the bridge of the unending patience, it looked exactly like the 31 worlds before it. Oseroth had been right about almost everything his entire life. The one thing he was wrong about, the one small, specific, fatal thing, was the waiting. He thought the humans were waiting for the end. They were not. They were waiting for proof. And in 12 hours, they would have it. The order was 3 words. Oseroth spoke them quietly, the way a man speaks when he has said something so many times it has lost all weight. The bridge crew did not react with ceremony. They moved, hands on controls, eyes on screens. The machinery of the 7th Fleet, 40 years of imperial engineering, doing what it was built to do. The first wave hit the planet's surface at dawn, local time. Oseroth watched from the sensor feed. He did not watch from his window. Windows were for things worth looking at. Sensor feeds were for data, and data was what this was. A city appeared on the display as a heat signature, a warm, dense cluster of energy, representing 9 million lives going about their morning. And then the signature spiked, white-hot and enormous, and then it flattened. Another city, the same spike, the same flat line after it. Another. His second-in-command, Veth, stood beside him and read the numbers aloud. Impact confirmation, structural collapse percentages, communication frequency drop across the affected zones. The numbers were good. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Blackout, Veth said at the 20-minute mark. Oseroth nodded. The planet had gone silent. Its radio signals, its music, its constant noise, all of it, cut off. On the sensor display, Earth was a dark shape against the stars, no longer broadcasting anything. This was normal, expected. In every previous absorption, the blackout came somewhere between 15 minutes and 2 hours after the first strike. It meant the communication infrastructure had been destroyed. It meant the species had lost the ability to coordinate a response. It meant the hardest part was over. The 7th Fleet held its position and waited. The second wave was scheduled for 6 hours out. A smaller force, mostly designed to address any surviving military installations, and demonstrate to whatever remained of the planet's population that resistance was a choice they were not being offered. Oseroth left the bridge. He walked to his private chamber, checked the temperature, and sat down with the administrative files that had been accumulating since they entered the system. Assignment orders for the absorption teams, resource surveys, preliminary maps of the tributary territory. The paperwork of Empire, as predictable and unromantic as everything else. He was reading the 3rd file when his data terminal chimed. He looked at the screen. It was the junior analyst. She was not supposed to contact him directly. There was a chain of command for a reason. He almost dismissed the message. Then he read the subject line. Secondary anomaly. Underground network. Active. He opened it. The underground structures the analyst had flagged in the briefing, the ones with the strange geometry and the large power source, had activated. Not in response to the strike. The timing was wrong for that. They had activated before the second wave, before any ground-level impact, as if something below the surface had been watching the first strike happen from underground and had been waiting for exactly that confirmation. Osirath stared at the report for a long moment. He typed back, noted, continue monitoring. He returned to his files. 40 minutes later, his terminal chimed again. He read the new message. He stood up. Something was rising from the planet's southern hemisphere. Not a missile. The trajectory was wrong. Too slow for a ballistic path. Too controlled. Not a ship. The sensor signature didn't match any drive system in the Imperial database. Not a signal either. Not exactly, though it behaved like one. It was structured, dense, and it was not aimed at the fleet. It was aimed outward, into deep space, pointed at a coordinate far beyond the edge of the system, broadcasting on a frequency that had no match in 40 years of human signal cataloging. The humans were transmitting something. Not to the fleet. Not to anyone in the system. To something else. Somewhere else. Osirath reached the bridge in 4 minutes. The crew was already tracking the transmission. On the main display, a thin line stretched from Earth's southern continent outward into the dark, aiming at a point that showed nothing on the standard charts. No star, no relay station, no recorded object. Source of the transmission, he asked. Underground, the analyst said. She was standing at her station across the bridge. She had not been asked to come to the bridge. She had come anyway. The network, the one I flagged. Duration, 17 seconds, she said. It ended 30 seconds ago. Silence on the bridge. Veth pulled up the coordinates the transmission had targeted. He ran them against the fleet star charts. Nothing. He ran them against the expanded Imperial database. Nothing. He ran them against the pre-expansion survey maps, the old ones, the ones made before the Empire had standardized galactic cartography and retired the charts made by the civilizations it had absorbed along the way. He found something. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Osirath. It's an old designation, he said, from a chart system we retired 160 years ago. No inhabited system at those coordinates. No recorded object of significance. He paused. Just a label. In one of the old survey languages. What does it say? Veth was quiet for a moment. The translation is approximate, he said. Something like, the place where the line ends. No one on the bridge spoke. Osirath looked at the display, at the thin line stretching from the dark side of the dead silent planet into the deeper dark beyond. The transmission was over. 17 seconds of something dense and structured, and aimed with enormous precision at a place that had no name in any living language. He thought about the underground structures, the strange geometry, the large power source, the timing of the activation. He thought about 31 species, all of them silent now, all of them absorbed, all of them gone. He thought about how the humans had never surrendered. Not yet. Most species sent a surrender signal within the first hour. It was instinct. When something large enough arrived in your sky and started doing what the Seventh Fleet was doing, you surrendered. You did it quickly. You did it because the alternative was obvious, and the part of you that wanted to survive understood mathematics. The humans had sent nothing. No distress call, no surrender, no message of any kind aimed at the fleet itself. Just those 17 seconds aimed somewhere else, at something that had no name. Osirath stood at his display and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to identify it because it had been so long since it had visited him. It was not quite fear. It was the feeling that sits just before fear, the feeling that the ground beneath a certainty is not as solid as it appeared, and that somewhere, in a direction you have not yet thought to look, something is about to shift. He went to his chamber that night. He checked the temperature. He adjusted it. He did not sleep. The Watcher had a name, but his colleagues called him the Watcher, and after 30 years of this work, he had stopped correcting them. He sat in the observation deck of the neutral vessel Recorded History, and read his own notes aloud to himself, the way he always did when he was getting close to a final draft. His monograph on the human species was almost finished. Had been almost finished for 2 years. He kept finding reasons to add more sections. The subject species, he read. Common designation human, scientific designation Homo sapiens sapiens, represents the 43rd species encountered by imperial expansion forces in the current survey period, and the 12th to demonstrate Class 4 technological development at time of first contact. Noteworthy for... He stopped. He looked at that last phrase for a long time. Noteworthy for what, exactly? He had written 17 different endings to that sentence over the past 2 years. Noteworthy for their aggressive internal conflicts. Noteworthy for their unusual biological resilience. Noteworthy for the speed of their technological development relative to their political organization. All of them were true. None of them felt like the right sentence to end on when writing about a species that was, as of this morning, in the process of being absorbed. He closed the monograph and set it on the desk beside him. Through the observation window, the planet Earth was visible as a pale curve against the dark. From this distance, at the periphery of the neutral observer flotilla, it looked undamaged, peaceful. The strikes were happening on the far side of the Terminator line, where it was local morning. The sensor readings told the real story. Heat spikes, structural collapse data, the flattening of signal traffic that always meant the same thing. But from here, with his own eyes, the planet just looked like a planet. He had watched 11 other absorptions from a similar distance. He was good at his work. He watched carefully. He felt the appropriate amount of professional regret at the loss of his study subjects. And then he wrote the final section of the monograph. And then he moved on to the next assignment. That was the job. He was good at it. He picked up his writing stylus. He began drafting the final section of the human monograph, the absorption summary. Standard format. Date of first contact, date of absorption. Key characteristics of the species. Notes on any unusual behaviors observed during the final phase. He wrote for about 12 minutes. Then he noticed something on his passive sensor display. He leaned forward. A transmission, coming from the planet, aimed not at the fleet, but outward, past the system's edge, into deep space. 17 seconds long, then silence. He noted it. Unusual. Not unprecedented. Some species sent final transmissions in the early phases of an absorption. Usually distress calls aimed at neighboring systems or old colonial worlds. Mostly they went unanswered. He flagged it in his notes and kept writing. Then he looked up from his work and noticed the Keth ambassador's vessel. It had rotated. The ship was moving, slowly but with clear intent, orienting its nose away from the inner system and toward open space. It was not broadcasting. No transponder signal. No channel traffic. The Keth ambassador had gone quiet and was facing the door. The Watcher watched this for a moment. He looked at the Meridian trading ships further out in the flotilla. 2 of them, both dark. No transponders, no broadcasts. They had gone silent sometime in the last 20 minutes, and their positioning, he checked the sensor readout again, their positioning had changed. They were not pointed at the planet anymore. They were pointed away from it. He opened a channel to the Keth vessel. No answer. He tried the Meridian ships. Nothing. He sat back in his chair. He looked at his monograph. He looked at the planet. He looked at the empty space where the transmission had been aimed. That thin line going out beyond the system's edge, to a coordinate that registered as nothing on his charts. He ran the coordinate through his own database. Standard results. Nothing. No object. No system. No recorded settlement. He ran it through his archive charts. The old ones. Pre-imperial. He had copies because his work sometimes required historical context. The histories of species that the Empire had absorbed, and whose records the Empire had, over time, quietly retired. He searched for 3 minutes. He found the coordinate in a chart made 430 years ago, before the expansion, when the galaxy had been navigated by different people, using different names. There was a label at the coordinate. He read it. He read it again. He set his stylus down on the desk very carefully, the way you set down something that might break if you move too quickly. He did not say the name out loud. He did not write it in his notes. He looked at the planet one more time. At the Keth vessel, now moving faster. At the Meridian ships, already gone from the flotilla. No transponder, no trace. The Watcher understood something then that he could not have put into a sentence if he had tried. It was not a thought. It was more like the feeling a person gets standing on a riverbank when the water level has changed. Not flood level, not yet, but different from yesterday, different from an hour ago, and the part of the brain that is older than language sends up a signal that has nothing to do with reasoning and everything to do with the simple animal instruction. Move. He closed his monograph. He did not finish the sentence about what the humans were noteworthy for. He opened his navigation system instead. He found the fastest route to the Meridian border. He looked at the fuel reserves. They were sufficient. He began the pre-departure sequence. His hands were not shaking. He noticed this. He thought about what it meant that his body had stopped pretending to be calm and had simply gone past it into a kind of perfect stillness. The stillness of a thing that has made its decision and is moving without arguing with itself. Behind him, through the observation window, the planet Earth turned in the light of its star. Somewhere below its surface, 17 seconds of signal had already done what it was sent to do. The Watcher did not know what that was. That was exactly why he was leaving. The thing that rose from Earth was not a fleet. It did not look like weapons. It did not behave like ships. It moved through the space between the planet and the Seventh Fleet the way a tide moves. Not aiming at anything in particular, not rushing, not broadcasting any kind of signal or challenge or warning. It simply rose, steady, patient, the way something moves when it has no reason to hurry because the outcome is not a question it is still asking. Fleet Singer Osirath Vale stood on the bridge of the unending patience and looked at the sensor display and said nothing for a long time. It was not the size of the thing. He had faced large forces before. Size was a number, and numbers could be worked with. It was the shape of it, the configuration, the way its components related to each other and to the fleet, not like weapons relate to a target, but like a system relates to a problem. As if the Seventh Fleet were not an enemy to be fought, but a condition to be corrected. Veth was speaking, giving orders. The crew was moving fast. The Seventh Fleet began its combat response, the protocol that had been tested and refined over 400 years of expansion, the protocol that had never been needed in full, not once, because no species had ever made it past the first demonstration of force. The protocol existed the way emergency exits exist. Thoroughly planned, never used, a comfort rather than a tool. It became a tool now. The first perimeter ships made contact with the outer edge of what was rising from the planet. Their reports to the flagship were professional, measured. The communications officers on those ships were well trained, and they spoke in the clipped, precise language of imperial military reporting, giving data, not feelings. Then the reports stopped. Not disrupted, not jammed, not cut off by interference. Finished. Minute 042. Osirath asked for a full report from the perimeter line. The sensor data came back instead of voices. He looked at where the perimeter ships had been. He looked at where they were now. They were not where they had been. Some of them were not anywhere. Minute 115. What is it? Osirath said. Not a question. The tone of a man who has asked questions his entire career and has just reached the first one with no answer behind it. Veth was running the sensor data through every analytical system the flagship carried. Military database, Scientific database. The archived records of every species the Empire had ever absorbed, every weapon system encountered, every form of resistance ever attempted. Nothing matched. It is not a weapon system, Veth said finally. His voice was very controlled. Not in any configuration we have record of. Then what is it? Veth looked at the display for a long moment. Infrastructure, he said. Minute 2:30. The analyst had been right. The underground structures were not bunkers. They were not shelters. They were not holes dug by frightened animals trying to survive what was coming. They were the answer to what was coming. The humans had looked at the sky 30 years ago, or 50 or 100. It did not matter, and they had seen or suspected or simply decided that something was out there, something large and patient, and eventually pointed at them, and they had made a choice, not to hide, not to run, not to build bigger weapons and point them up. They had built a machine, over decades, underground, in 6 continents, in tunnels with geometry that matched nothing in the Imperial database, because it was not designed for any purpose the Imperial database had a category for. And they had connected it to a power source the size of a small city, and they had waited. Waited for proof. The strike had been the proof. And 17 seconds after the first strike, they had sent their signal to the place with no name. And the place with no name had answered. This was what had risen from the planet. This was what was moving through the fleet now. Minute 4:00. The main display showed a fleet that was becoming smaller. Not destroyed. That was the wrong word. Addressed. Each ship contacted individually, with specificity and patience, the way you address a problem that you have spent a long time preparing for and intend to resolve completely. The second wing, gone. The third. Minute 5:30. Fleet command log, requesting immediate support from F command log. The second wing has been gone. Fleet command log, it is moving through us the way, it does not stop. Fleet command log, we did not know. Minute 8:00. From the observation deck of a fleeing neutral vessel, the watcher watched. He had stopped writing. He watched the 7th Fleet being addressed. He watched each ship contacted, one at a time, with a precision that was not rage. Rage is imprecise. Rage is wide. Rage takes what it can reach and doesn't stop to measure. This was not rage. This was the work of something that had spent decades measuring, decades preparing, decades waiting for the proof it needed before it would allow itself to act. The watcher sat very still and watched and did not write anything. Minute 11:30. Osirath was alone on the bridge. Not because his crew had abandoned him. He did not hold that against them. He had told them to go. He had given the order himself, quietly, sometime between minute 9 and minute 10, when it became clear that the protocol was not working, had never been going to work, had been designed for a problem that was not the problem they were facing. He tried to record a final log entry. Old habit. The discipline of a lifetime. He opened the recording system. He said 3 words. He closed it. Minute 13:58. Somewhere in the neutral flotilla, the few ships still present, the ones that had not yet fled, a Keth captain opened a broadcast channel. He was an old captain. He had been in this region of space for 11 years on a commercial routing assignment, and had seen very little of any consequence, and had expected to keep seeing very little of any consequence until he retired. He broadcast in 7 languages, including the oldest trade tongue still in active use, the one that predated the Empire by 200 years. He asked one question. What were you waiting for? Silence. Then a voice answered. Human. Clear. Calm in the way that things are calm when they have finished a very long wait. Proof. Minute 14:00. The 7th Fleet of the Vreth Empire occupied the space between Earth's moon and the outer system marker. Then it did not. Some systems still broadcast automated distress signals into the dark, the way lights stay on after a building is gone. Most of the fleet was simply no longer there. The planet below was dark and quiet. Not silent the way an absorbed world is silent. Silent the way a thing is silent after it has finished what it set out to do. One escape pod had made it clear of the flagship before the end. The tracking systems of the neutral observer vessels recorded its departure at minute 13:42. Headed outward, no destination broadcast, just moving away from something as fast as a small pod could move. The pod held one person, the junior analyst, the one who had been right, the one no one had listened to. She did not broadcast anything either. She just moved, away and away and away into the dark. Behind her, where the Seventh Fleet had been, the stars looked the same as they always had, except now there was more room between them. 1 year later, the Watcher was teaching. He stood in a lecture hall at the University of the Meridian Worlds and looked out at 40 young xenographers, all of them fresh and sharp and full of the particular confidence that comes from knowing a great deal and having seen very little. He had been like them once. He remembered the feeling. It was not unpleasant. It was just incomplete. Behind him a star chart covered the entire back wall of the hall. Most of it was the same chart that students in this program had been looking at for 200 years, the standard map of the explored galaxy. Stars in their positions, systems marked by color, blue for Empire territories, green for neutral trade zones, gold for meridian space, gray for uncharted regions. There was a large area on the chart that had not always been gray. The students had been looking at it since they walked in. It was hard not to look at it. It was enormous. The Vreth Empire had been enormous, one of the 3 largest organized territories in the explored galaxy, 4 centuries old, 31 absorbed worlds, a fleet presence at 11 strategic points. It had been blue on this chart since before any living person had been born. It was gray now. Not uncharted, not conquered, not transferred to any other designation, just gray. The Watcher began his lecture without ceremony. He told them the facts in order, the timeline of first contact between the Vreth Empire and the human species, the 30 years of observation, the decision to absorb, the strike, the 17-second transmission, the 14 minutes. He told it the way you tell it when you have told it many times and have learned to keep your voice flat. The students were very quiet. They were good students. They understood that the flat voice was the voice of someone who had been there, and that you did not interrupt the flat voice. When he finished, a student near the front raised a hand. Why didn't they do it earlier? She asked. The humans, if they had the capability, why wait for the strike? Why let the cities burn first? The Watcher had been expecting this question. He had been asked it, in some form, by every person he had spoken to in the past year. Because of what the transmission was, he said, it was not a weapon trigger, it was a request. He let that sit. The humans had been building their response for decades. The machine, the signal, the thing that rose from the planet. None of it was theirs, not entirely. They had built something that could contact an old power, something that existed before the Empire, before most of what we know about this part of the galaxy. He paused, and that power had conditions. What conditions? Another student asked. They needed to be struck first, the Watcher said. The old power, whatever it is, wherever it exists, it does not act on behalf of a species based on a threat, based on a fear, based on what might happen. It acts on behalf of a species that has been harmed, that has proof. The 17 seconds were not a weapon activation. They were a submission of evidence. Silence in the hall. The humans spent 30 years preparing a legal case, a student in the back row said slowly, as if he was still working out whether he believed his own sentence. For a judge that none of us knew existed. That is one way to describe it, the Watcher said. A young man in the third row, bright-eyed, already a little impatient with the pace of things, the kind of student who had been top of every class he had ever sat in, leaned forward. That's just posturing after a win, he said. Every species frames their victory as justified. The humans got lucky with some old weapon system they found, and now everyone treats it like philosophy. The Watcher looked at him. He did not answer immediately. He turned to the side of the hall, where a second display was mounted, and he brought up the footage from his own observation deck, the sensor recordings from minute 8 to minute 12. The Seventh Fleet being addressed, ship by ship, system by system. The precision of it, showing on the display as clean lines of contact, each one resolving completely before the next began. The students watched it. The young man in the third row watched it. His expression changed. "It is not a weapon," the watcher said. "A weapon does not choose. A weapon does not wait. A weapon does not move through 40 kilometers of the most advanced military engineering in the explored galaxy with the patience of something that has been waiting a very long time to do exactly this, and intends to do it without any unnecessary harm to anything that was not the specific cause of the specific harm." He stopped. What addressed the Seventh Fleet could have addressed a great deal more. It addressed only the fleet, only those ships, only those systems. Nothing else in the region was touched. He let that settle. After the 14 minutes, he continued, the humans broadcast a message on all frequencies, a short one. I will read it to you. He looked down at his notes, though he had not needed notes for this in 6 months. He read it because it felt wrong to say it from memory. It felt like the kind of thing that should be held in your hands when you delivered it. We have been patient. We will always be patient first. But there is a point past which patience ends, and memory begins. And memory does not forget, and does not negotiate. We did not want this. We want you to know that we did not want this. We will not begin. But if you begin, we will finish. And what finishes for us will be finished completely, and without anger, and without joy, and with the full understanding of what was started, and by whom. The hall was very quiet. One of the students, the young woman near the front, the one who had asked the first question, said softly, "That's not a threat." "No," the watcher said. It's almost kind." "Yes," he said. That was the thing he had spent a year trying to put into a sentence and had never managed. The broadcast was not a warning from something that wanted to be feared. It was a warning from something that genuinely, deeply did not want to do this again. The humans were not celebrating. They were not gloating. They were explaining, patiently, with what sounded like real regret, exactly how the system worked, so that no one else would make the same mistake the Vreth Empire had made. The Empire had made a decision based on the belief that no one was keeping score. Someone was keeping score. Someone had always been keeping score. He dismissed the class shortly after. The students filed out. He listened to them talking in the corridor. Quick voices, argument and counter-argument, the sound of young minds doing what young minds do when they have been handed something they cannot resolve before lunch. He found that he was glad for it. The noise of people working something out. He stayed in the hall alone for a while. He stood in front of the star chart. He looked at the gray swathe. He tried to remember the blue that had been there before. He had looked at this chart his whole career. He knew where every designation had been. He should have been able to see the blue in his memory, the way you can see a piece of furniture in a room after it has been removed. He could not. The gray was too complete, too final. The blue was simply gone. He looked at the room around him. The lecture hall was the same temperature it always was. The environmental system was good here, well maintained, consistent. He had never had to adjust it once in the months he had been teaching in this building. He checked the panel on the wall anyway. The temperature was fine. He adjusted it. He turned off the star chart and walked out of the empty hall, and the door closed behind him, and the gray swath on the wall disappeared into the dark, along with everything else.